Rice is one of the most trusted foods in America. It's simple, it's affordable, it's something we feed our kids without thinking twice. But what if the bag sitting in your pantry right now contains measurable levels of a toxic heavy metal? Multiple rounds of testing from the FDA and Consumer Reports have confirmed something most shoppers never hear about. Rice absorbs more inorganic arsenic than almost any other grain, and the levels aren't the same across the board. They vary depending on where the rice was grown, whether it's brown or white, and sometimes even the specific brand. In some cases, arsenic levels in certain rice varieties tested nearly double compared to others. That's not a small difference, especially if rice is a weekly or daily staple in your home. This video isn't about panic, it's about awareness. We're breaking down 5 rice brands and categories that have tested higher in publicly available reports, 2 that consistently test lower, and the simple swaps that can cut exposure dramatically. Because when it comes to rice, the safest choice isn't about price or popularity, it's about geography. Let's get into it. Why rice absorbs more arsenic than other foods. Arsenic exists naturally in the Earth's crust. It's in soil, rock, and groundwater. But in the United States, there's another factor: history. For decades, arsenic-based pesticides were heavily used in cotton farming across the southern US, especially in Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. When those cotton fields were later converted into rice fields, the arsenic didn't disappear. It stayed in the soil, and now here's where rice is different. Most crops grow in dry soil, rice grows in flooded fields. Flooded conditions allow arsenic in soil to dissolve into the water, making it easier for the rice plant to absorb it through its roots. And rice absorbs arsenic more efficiently than almost any other crop. According to FDA data, rice can contain measurable levels of inorganic arsenic, the more toxic form, at levels significantly higher than wheat, corn, or oats. Another important factor: brown rice versus white rice. Arsenic accumulates in the outer layer of the grain, the bran. Brown rice keeps that layer. White rice removes it during milling. That means brown rice typically contains more arsenic than white rice. And yet, brown rice is often marketed as the healthier choice. Nutritionally, it has more fiber, but from a heavy metal standpoint, it usually carries higher arsenic levels. That doesn't mean avoid brown rice completely. It means sourcing and frequency matter. Now let's talk brands. 5 rice brands that have tested higher. Important disclaimer: these products are legal and sold nationwide. Higher means relative to lower testing alternatives in Consumer Reports and public lab findings, not that they violate federal law. 1. Southern US long grain rice. If you buy standard long grain rice in the United States, there's a strong chance it was grown in Arkansas, Louisiana, or Texas. Those 3 states produce the majority of American rice. Here's the issue. Multiple rounds of Consumer Reports testing have shown that rice grown in parts of the southern US tends to contain higher levels of inorganic arsenic compared to rice grown in California or imported basmati from India and Pakistan. This isn't about one specific company cutting corners. It's about geography. For decades, arsenic-based pesticides were used heavily in southern cotton farming. When those fields were later converted to rice production, residual arsenic remained in the soil. Because rice is grown in flooded conditions, it absorbs that arsenic more efficiently than most other crops. Ben's Original, formerly Uncle Ben's, sources from multiple US regions. Some tested samples aligned with the moderate arsenic ranges associated with southern grown rice. That doesn't mean the brand is unsafe or violating regulations. It means the sourcing region influences exposure levels. And the difference isn't minor. In certain Consumer Reports findings, imported basmati rice tested at close to half the arsenic levels of some southern long grain samples. If rice is something you eat occasionally, the impact is likely small, but if rice is a daily staple in your household, region matters more than brand familiarity. Checking where your rice is grown may be one of the simplest ways to reduce long-term exposure. Number 2, great value brown rice. Store brands are designed to win on one thing: price. Great Value, Walmart's private label, is built around affordability and high volume sourcing. And when it comes to staple foods like rice, that usually means buying from large, cost-efficient producers, often in the southern United States, where rice production is concentrated. Here's where it becomes relevant. In multiple Consumer Reports tests over the years, some store brand brown rice samples, including private label products, tested higher in inorganic arsenic compared to imported basmati rice and California-grown white rice. The pattern wasn't unique to Walmart. It reflects broader sourcing trends tied to geography. But brown rice adds another layer to the issue. Arsenic concentrates in the outer bran layer of the grain. Brown rice keeps that layer intact. White rice removes it during milling. That means brown rice from higher arsenic regions will typically test higher than white rice from the same region. To be clear, this does not mean great value rice is illegal, contaminated beyond federal guidance, or unsafe to eat occasionally. It means the combination of brown rice plus southern sourcing can elevate long-term exposure compared to lower testing alternatives. Private label brands operate on tight margins. That can limit sourcing flexibility, especially when the goal is consistent low pricing nationwide. If you're buying brown rice purely based on cost, without checking origin, you may be increasing cumulative exposure without realizing it. And that's the key word, cumulative. A single serving isn't the issue. Daily, long-term consumption is where differences between rice types and growing regions start to matter. Number 3. Mahatma Rice. Mahatma is one of the most recognizable rice brands in American grocery stores. It's affordable, widely distributed, and often positioned as a reliable pantry staple. But like several major US rice brands, Mahatma sources heavily from southern rice-growing states, particularly Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas. And this is where the pattern shows up again. In Consumer Reports testing and public laboratory comparisons, long-grain rice grown in parts of the southern United States has frequently tested higher in inorganic arsenic than rice grown in California, or imported basmati from India and Pakistan. This isn't about the logo on the bag, it's about geography. Southern agricultural soil has higher residual arsenic levels in certain areas due to historical pesticide use in cotton farming decades ago. When those fields were converted to rice production, the arsenic remained in the soil. Because rice is grown in flooded conditions, it absorbs more of that arsenic compared to other grains. If a rice package lists Arkansas, Louisiana, or Texas as the origin, statistically speaking, arsenic levels are more likely to be higher than rice grown in California or certain imported regions. Some Mahatma varieties may be sourced from different areas, but without consistently clear front-facing origin labeling, many consumers simply don't check. And that's the key takeaway. The safest move isn't automatically switching brands. It's flipping the bag over and checking where the rice was grown. When it comes to arsenic and rice, location matters more than brand loyalty. Number 4, brown rice. This one isn't about a specific brand, it's about how the grain itself works. Brown rice consistently tests higher in inorganic arsenic than white rice, and the reason is biological, not political. Arsenic tends to accumulate in the outer layers of the rice grain, particularly in the bran. Brown rice keeps that bran layer intact. White rice removes it during the milling process. So when you choose brown rice, you're also choosing the part of the grain where arsenic concentrates. Consumer Reports has repeatedly shown that brown rice averages higher inorganic arsenic levels than white rice grown in the same region. That means if both are sourced from a southern US state, the brown version will typically test higher. And yet, brown rice is often marketed as the healthier default. Nutritionally, it does contain more fiber, magnesium, and certain vitamins. For many people, that's beneficial, but heavy metals don't respond to nutrition labels or marketing language. If brown rice is something you eat occasionally as part of a varied diet, it's unlikely to be a major concern. The issue arises when it becomes a daily staple, especially for children who are more vulnerable to cumulative heavy metal exposure due to lower body weight. This doesn't mean avoid brown rice entirely, it means balance matters. Rotating grains, quinoa, barley, farro, bulgur, and alternating between white and brown rice can significantly reduce long-term arsenic exposure without eliminating rice from your diet. Moderation and variety are smarter strategies than blind loyalty to any one healthier label. Number 5, rice-based processed foods. This one flies under the radar for most families. We're not just talking about a bowl of rice at dinner. We're talking about rice-based snacks, rice crackers, rice pasta, rice milk, puffed rice cereals, toddler snacks, and especially infant rice cereal. Because rice naturally accumulates inorganic arsenic more efficiently than other grains, foods made primarily from rice can concentrate that exposure, particularly when eaten frequently. The FDA has recognized this risk. In fact, the agency set guidance levels specifically for inorganic arsenic in infant rice cereal because babies consume it in small bodies. babies, often daily during critical developmental stages. And here's where it becomes important. If a child eats rice cereal for breakfast, rice crackers as a snack, rice pasta for lunch, and drinks rice milk, that exposure compounds. Each serving may fall within regulatory limits, but cumulative intake across multiple rice-based foods can add up quickly. This isn't about panic, and it's about pattern recognition. Rice-based foods are often marketed as gentle, gluten-free, and easy to digest. That makes them extremely popular for babies and toddlers, the very group most sensitive to heavy metal exposure relative to body weight. And to be clear, this is not a brand-specific issue. It's a category issue. The solution isn't eliminating rice entirely, it's rotating grains. Oat cereal instead of rice cereal, quinoa pasta instead of rice pasta, whole grain crackers instead of rice crackers every single day. Variety dramatically reduces cumulative exposure. When it comes to arsenic in rice-based processed foods, the real risk isn't one serving. It's repetition without rotation. Now that we've covered where arsenic levels tend to run higher, let's shift gears. Because this isn't about scaring you away from rice. It's about choosing smarter. So instead of focusing only on what to avoid, let's look at the rice options that have repeatedly tested lower and are generally considered safer choices based on publicly available data. Here are the brands and varieties that stand out for the right reasons. Number 1. Imported basmati rice. Over multiple rounds of Consumer Reports testing, basmati grown in these regions consistently ranked among the lowest in inorganic arsenic levels. In some comparisons, levels were close to half those found in certain southern US long-grain rice samples. Why? It comes down to soil history and irrigation systems. The regions where traditional basmati is grown did not experience the same arsenic-heavy pesticide legacy tied to US cotton farming decades ago. That difference in soil composition directly affects how much arsenic the rice plant absorbs. White basmati tends to test lower than brown basmati for the same reason white rice generally contains less arsenic. The outer bran layer has been removed. This doesn't mean imported basmati is arsenic-free, no rice is, but comparatively speaking, it has repeatedly tested lower than many domestic long-grain varieties. If rice is a weekly or daily staple in your home, switching to imported basmati is one of the easiest ways to reduce long-term exposure without giving up rice entirely. Just check the label. Look for clearly stated origin, India or Pakistan. Geography matters more than branding. Number 2. California grown white jasmine or sushi rice. If you prefer to buy domestic, California grown white rice is generally a safer option compared to rice grown in parts of the southern US. A Consumer Reports testing has consistently shown California grown white rice averaging lower inorganic arsenic levels than rice sourced from Arkansas, Louisiana, or Texas. The reason again comes down to soil history. California rice fields were not historically used for arsenic-based cotton pesticides in the same way some southern agricultural land was. Lower soil arsenic means lower absorption into the rice grain. White rice specifically tests lower than brown rice because the arsenic-rich bran layer is removed during milling. California grown jasmine or sushi rice often falls into the lower testing category compared to southern long grain rice. It's not zero, but it's typically meaningfully lower. For families who eat rice multiple times per week, choosing California grown white rice can reduce cumulative exposure over time. The key is checking origin labeling. Some brands blend sources, others clearly list California grown. If the bag tells you where it was grown, you're already ahead of most consumers. Why California and imported basmati often test lower? Not all rice is created equal, and geography plays a major role. One reason California grown rice often tests lower in inorganic arsenic is historical land use. Unlike parts of Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas, California rice fields were not widely used for arsenic-based cotton pesticides decades ago. That means the baseline arsenic levels in certain California soils tend to be lower. So when rice is grown there, the plant simply has less arsenic available to absorb. Imported basmati rice from India and Pakistan shows a similar pattern, but for different reasons. Basmati is typically grown in regions with distinct soil compositions and irrigation practices that historically have lower arsenic accumulation compared to parts of the southern United States. Consumer Reports testing over multiple years has consistently reflected this difference. Two patterns show up repeatedly. California grown white rice tends to test lower than southern US grown long grain rice. Imported basmati, especially from India and Pakistan, often ranks among the lowest in inorganic arsenic levels. And the difference isn't small. In certain comparisons, inorganic arsenic levels in imported basmati were close to half those found in some southern long grain samples. That's a meaningful gap, especially if rice is something you eat several times a week. This doesn't mean all southern rice is bad, or all imported rice is automatically superior. Testing varies by batch and year, but statistically, if your goal is lowering arsenic exposure while continuing to eat rice regularly, checking for California-grown white rice or imported basmati is one of the simplest, most evidence-backed adjustments you can make. Bonus, rotate grains instead of relying on rice daily. Here's the smartest long-term strategy, and it's not brand specific. Don't rely on rice as your only grain. Even lower arsenic rice still contains some inorganic arsenic. The real risk comes from repetition without variety. Rotating grains dramatically reduces cumulative exposure. Instead of rice every day, consider quinoa, barley, farro, bulgur, oats, couscous. Most of these grains consistently test far lower in arsenic than rice. If you alternate rice with other whole grains throughout the week, you naturally dilute long-term exposure without eliminating rice from your diet. That's the big picture. You don't need to panic. You don't need to throw out your pantry. You just need to diversify. When it comes to arsenic in rice, the safest strategy isn't perfection, it's rotation. Rice isn't the enemy, but blind trust is. The difference between higher and lower arsenic levels often comes down to one simple detail most people ignore: where the rice was grown. Southern US long grain rice tends to test higher. Brown rice typically carries more than white. Imported basmati and California grown white rice consistently test lower. That's not fear, that's data. And the goal here isn't to eliminate rice from your life. It's to make smarter swaps if rice is something you eat every week or every day. Check the origin label, rotate your grains, avoid relying on rice-based processed foods as a daily staple. Small changes compound over time. If this video helped you look at your pantry differently, hit like and subscribe. We break down everyday foods using real reports and real testing. Not hype, not trends. And next time you grab a bag of rice, flip it over. Because sometimes the most important detail is the one printed in small letters on the back.